here with my partner in crime, Beverly Gottleib. We are mentors with SCORE Boston. And we're presenting our workshop today on how small business owners can sell better and sell more. Before we get started, let me introduce our administrator extraordinaire, Teresa Lang. She's going to tell you a little bit about SCORE and if you want to get a mentor from SCORE, how you can do that. Teresa?
Okay, great. Thanks, Dick. Okay, I want to tell you a little bit about SCORE. There's three really important things that SCORE does for small businesses. One is the website. It's great. It's got tons of information. There's actual templates that you can download, marketing templates, financial templates, business plan templates, you name it, they're there. There's also blogs and lots of articles and little training things you can check out, as well as previously recorded webinars. We also offer, as you're here today, workshops and webinars and training on every business topic you can imagine. We'll be running this fall and winter into about mid-December, and then we'll be starting again in January. So keep an eye out for our newsletters, or you can find the listings and offerings on the website as well. The most important thing that SCORE does, however, is the mentoring. Our mentoring is free and confidential. Our mentors come to us from every background and have a variety of experience and knowledge to share with you. And we work with folks that are trying to decide if small business is for them. We're working with those that are in that planning phase, and we're working with those that are already in business. A beginning session is going to be learning about what your goals and challenges are and helping you formulate a plan to meet those goals and overcome those challenges. So I strongly encourage you to reach out for a mentor. You can use the QR code here, or super easy, go to score.org. There's a little blue box, put in your zip code. That will match you to a chapter. They'll ask you questions about how a mentor can help you, and that chapter will reach out to you and match you to the appropriate mentor. You will see all of the district, the chapters in our district listed here. You can go to the specific websites here, or again, directly to the score.org. Any of those options will get you to that little enter your zip code part. So, a couple things today. We do anticipate a decent number of attendees today. So we will be using the Q&A button on your Zoom bar. That will be for questions for our presenter. Everything else can go into the chat. That's not a problem. We are recording today, and the recording will be posted in about 24 to 48 hours. Score.org/Boston. Under the local workshop tab, there's previously recorded, and there you will find the recording as soon as it's posted. So I'm going to pull down my share, and I'm going to turn it over to Dick and Beverly.
Thanks, Teresa. I appreciate that. Before we get started, Beverly, why don't you tell the group a little bit about your background, and then I'll do the same, and then we'll get going.
Okay. Happy Halloween, everybody. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School. I was an accountant for 3 years, long enough to be certified. And at the age of 25, I started my company, which I sold at age 50 and was able to successfully retire. So it was a sales organization. I did insurance planning and benefits planning for the high-tech and biotech industry. And Dick, would you like to go now?
Sure. So my background is strictly in small businesses in the New England area. I was initially in a family-owned business, a very successful commercial printing company outside of Boston. My role was sales and marketing, a VP sales and marketing. Left that company in the early 90s and had similar roles with a software company, another manufacturing company, professional services company, and then became a sales coach and a sales trainer and a sales consultant, working with sales teams to help them improve their selling skills. I live in Wayland and been here for a long time. And I think that's enough about me for sure. Before we get started, we'd like to learn a little bit about who's in our audience. So if you could put in the chat just two or three words about your business, not where it is, not the name. What do you sell? Just like to hear what folks are in our group today, and what is it that they sell? What's your product or your service? Teresa, maybe you want to read them out as they come in.
Sure, I can do that. We've got coaching, residential interior design, corrugated packaging, biotech, high tech, wigs for medical hair loss, battery materials, life transition services for seniors. And we've got them all today, I tell you. Fiber optic communications for the military, artwork, whole food nutritional products, clothing, Italian kitchens and bathrooms, jewelry, advertisements, permanent cosmetics, pet treats. Yeah.
Well, we got to stall a little bit because I forgot to bring up the PowerPoint. I'm responsible for the PowerPoint. Unless, Teresa, do you have it?
I can go get it. It'll take me a moment to go get it.
All right, we'll see who gets it first. I apologize, group. I had two major responsibilities today, and I've already blown it. There we go.
You have it, or?
I think so.
Okay.
Let's see. I can. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Working? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that, everyone. Let's make sure that we're all on the same page here. And so that we understand the difference between sales and marketing. Marketing is what makes people aware of your product or your service. So your marketing could be any advertising you do, any social media that you use, your branding, any blogs that you write, any webinars that you present, or any speaking engagements, your direct mail, maybe a trade show that you exhibit in. Those are all marketing tools and techniques, and they're all good ones. But they lead and they set the stage for a sale, and it's sales that gets the order. It's sales that puts bucks in your pocket. I'm going to guess that many of you today are what we call solopreneurs. You're the only person in your business. And so that means that you're wearing lots of hats and you're responsible for every aspect of your business. And so that makes you a salesperson. If you own your own business, you're in sales. And that makes some people uncomfortable. I've worked with some people who have a solid engineering background, or they're a financial type. And the last thing that they have any experience in or want to or think of themselves as being in sales. And that's fine. Because what I want to suggest to you today is that if that makes you uncomfortable, I want you to think of yourself as a solution provider, as someone who solves problems, because that's really what a salesperson does. They meet someone, a prospect that perhaps might have a problem that you can help them with. You ask the right questions. You determine they have a need. If you convince them that you can solve that problem, they're going to give you some money and buy your good or service, and you've concluded a sale, and that's a wonderful experience, because you've got a valuable service or a valuable product that you can offer, and you can help people's lives significantly by that. And so your job is to, as we're going to talk about, ask the right questions so that you can show that prospect who you are and what you do and how you can help them. But in the meantime, you're in sales, and salespeople sometimes have an unfortunate perception. It's an unfortunate perception about salespeople. So put in the chat, what are some of the words when I say salesperson that you think of that may not be especially flattering? Teresa, you want to read them off as some of them come in?
Sleazy.
Oh, we got that one right away. Okay.
Yeah, right up front.
Maybe pushy, aggressive,
Interrupting.
Okay. I've heard dishonest. Don't like that one. So this is a little bit of a cross we have to bear as salespeople, but you will learn today, I hope, that you don't need to have any of these traits. I hope that you have none of them, and you can still be a successful salesperson, and you will have customers who appreciate you and value you. And if sales makes you uncomfortable, then there are some processes that you need to learn that will work. And as you learn them and put them into action, you will become more comfortable. Because, as I said, you've got a valuable service, and done right, this technique, the sales process, is going to benefit both you and your customer. But you need to remember that not everyone you meet is ready to buy your good, your service, your product at this moment. Their problem may not be large enough. So you need to learn to handle rejection, because no one is successful all the time. And that's fine. But that doesn't mean that 6 months from now, their problem may grow, and you want to be top of mind. And so your job will be to stay in touch with them, and not aggressively, not in a pushy fashion, but when they're ready to solve that problem they have, you want them to think of you. Remember, people want to buy, but no one wants to be sold to. So if you remember that's going to color how your conversation and how you handle the sales process. And before you get started, what's really important is having confidence. You need to believe two things. You need to believe in the benefits of your product or your service, and you need to believe that you indeed can solve your customer's problem, your customer's situation. And you also need to believe that when you're having a conversation with a prospect, that you're going to be able to ask them the right questions and say the right things, and convince them that now is the time that they should be buying from you. That may not happen, but you need to believe that it's going to happen, because if you walk into a selling situation with an attitude that this isn't going to work today, you just know it, then you've talked yourself out of an order for sure. So having the right attitude and believing you're going to be successful is really important. Have you ever heard of the phrase head trash? Head trash is what goes on in our head that stops us from doing what we want to do or going to do, that has no basis in fact or at all. So let's say you're in a networking meeting, and there's a lot of people in the room, and you're looking over to someone who's standing there by himself, and they may be a prospect for you, but you think, oh my goodness, that person's giving me the evil eye. There's no way I'm going to talk with him. Well, you don't know that. There's no basis. There's no factual proof of that. Maybe they've got something stuck in their eye. How do you know? And so what I'm saying is, get that out of your head, walk over them, stick out your hand, introduce yourself, and say, ask them what they do for a living. So head trash is something that limits us, that stops our acting, and we all need to just ignore it and get it out of our head. But you also need to know, as we said, that you're not going to turn every prospect into a customer today, and that's okay. The other important mental attitude that you need to understand is being able to separate your identity from your role. Your identity is who you are as a person. You're a father, you're a husband, you're a grandmother, you're a good neighbor. That's your identity as a person. And hopefully we all think of ourselves in that way as on a scale of 0 to 10, as a 9 or a 10. But we also have lots of roles in life. Maybe you're a hockey coach, or you're a carpool driver, or today you're in your role as a salesperson. So that's the role we're talking about today. But let's say maybe you had a bad day in that salesperson role. You made 20 calls and no one picked up the phone, or you were talking to a prospect and you thought they were going to become a customer today, and they decided to postpone it for a month. So at the end of the day, and you go home, and maybe you only grade yourself as a salesperson today and as a 5 or a 6. Well, that doesn't mean that you're still not a 9 or a 10 in your identity as a person. And you need to keep that in mind at all times, and also think about why you're only a 5 or 6 today as a salesperson, so you can make some changes, and so that the next day you'll become that 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. What's really important is understanding who is your customer, who's your target customer. I'll ask a new client sometimes that I'm working with at SCORE, and I'll say, who's a potential customer for you? And every once in a while, someone will say, well, the hair product that I sell, that it really can be sold to anyone. Anyone can use my hair product. And I cringe a bit, and I say, well, that may be true, but it's not realistic. You can't sell to everyone. You need to create a niche, and you need to break that down to a group of folks that you can market to in a reasonable fashion that makes sense and is relatively easy. So breaking your target customer down by geography or age or profession or interest is really important, and you have to do that to find that niche so that you can market to them. So let's say you sell HR benefits, and there may be lots of businesses that can use your HR benefits, but you're focusing on the pharmaceutical industry, and it's important to you that that you have face-to-face meetings. So your target then are HR managers at businesses with more than 100 employees in New England in the pharmaceutical industry. That's a niche that you can identify, you can create a database around, you can market to, and it may be that and you can become a big fish in that. You want to become the big fish in that niche that we just described. Now, it may be that you develop another pond and you expand beyond the pharmaceutical industry, and that's fine. You can have lots of little ponds, but define your target customer, become an expert in what you do. I'll give you an example. I had a client who was an oncology massage therapist in the Framingham, Mass area. And they were very good, but she had a lot of competition. There were a lot of massage therapists. And so she took a step back and got licensed as an oncology massage therapist. So now she was working with cancer patients who were in pain and discomfort, and her massage ability really provided a lot of comfort to them. She started to meet physicians and hospitals, and she became extremely successful. She became the big fish in a smaller pond. And so think about that as you define your market. You also need to remember in this selling process that it's not about you, and it's not all about the wonderful features that you offer. It's about the value that you provide and the problems that you can solve for your prospects and your clients. So focus on 180 degrees from, I've got all these wonderful features that my healthcare products offer. What are the benefits? What makes your offering valuable to your customer? And then what distinguishes you from your competition? How do you set yourself apart to solve these problems for your customer? And always be asking the question, why should your customer buy from you? What is it that you, your manner, your selling approach, the people who work with you, the product, your service, why should your customer be buying from you? And that message, though, that information is what you want to be focusing in all of your messaging, your website, your elevator pitch, your content, your blogs. Always be focusing on the problems that you solve. SCORE has a whole separate webinar on developing an elevator pitch, if that's something that you might need help on, or Beverly and I can certainly help you with that too. But that elevator pitch wants to be focused on I help or I work with. You want those phrases in your elevator pitch, not my products have the latest and greatest ingredients. So what? What's the value in that product or that service? I talked a lot about your the problems that you can solve, and we call that pain. We call the problems that your customers and prospects have is what their pain. And I don't mean they have a sore arm. I mean, what's going on in their business that's making it difficult that maybe you're the solution to. And the only way that you can find out what that real problem is by asking questions. So let's say you're in a networking event. You're selling HR, human resource benefit. You're selling life insurance, accidental death and disability, maybe some health insurance to small business. And you meet a small business owner. You tell them what you do, and she says, you know, I'm thinking, I'm not sure the benefits I'm offering my employees are up to par. Well, what's the typical salesperson do? At least maybe not physically, but at least mentally at that point. They jump up and down. They mentally wave their arms. Say, "Oh, I've got a live one here," and they say to this person, "Well, that's what I do. I can help you. Let's meet." Well, you may get that meeting, but I don't think the odds are very good. And so I'm going to suggest instead that you start to ask that person some what are called pain funnel questions. That's what's here. Oh, can you tell me a little bit more about that? What's the real problem? You know, how long has that been a problem? How long has that been going on? What have you tried to do about it? You know, if you can't solve this problem, what do you think is going to happen? Note the tone of my voice. You want to be asking these questions with empathy. You want to show that your prospect that you care, that you're concerned. And if you ask those questions, you're going to get, you should get an answer that includes some what we call FUDWACA words. FUDWACA stands for fear, uncertainty, doubt, worry, anger, concern, anxiety, and there's many more. But you might hear from that business owner, you know, I've lost 3 of my key employees, and if I lose another one because they're going to my competition because the benefits that they offer are so much better than what I'm offering, and if I lose another one, I know my company's in real jeopardy, and I'm really worried about that. Now you're in a position to be able to say, "Oh my goodness, that sounds terrible. I've worked with business owners who've been in that exact same situation. And geez, I think it might make sense for us to meet. And I'll tell you how I helped them and how it worked out." Well, you're now, having said all that, there's 100% chance that you're going to get that meeting. But initially, if you just spoke to that business owner when she said, "I'm thinking of adding some benefits to my company," maybe you get the meeting, maybe not. But now you're in a much stronger position, and you've shown that person that you care. And that's really what selling in this situation is all about. Let's talk a little bit about price, because people think that if their price is lower than their competition, that they're going to sell more. And I'm going to say to that, baloney. You don't have to have the lowest price to increase your sales and be very successful, because low price doesn't necessarily equal best value. In that situation we were just talking about, I'm going to contend that that business owner is, at this moment, is much less concerned about how much your benefits are going to cost her than you can help her from losing more employees and having her business be in jeopardy. So if you've established the value of your offering, which is what that salesperson is now in a position to do, price becomes much less important in the decision. When your prospect complains that your price is too high, maybe you haven't done a very good job asking enough questions, asking the right questions, showing that empathy in the selling process. I mean, it's real easy for a prospect to say, you know, when you've sent them a proposal, it's real easy for somebody, sorry, your price was too high. But I'm convinced that that's not nearly always the case. I think it's the fact that the salesperson hasn't done a good job, and the prospect's not going to tell you. They're not going to say, "Gee, I didn't really relate to what you were telling me in that sales meeting." They're not going to say that to you. They're not going to want to hurt your feelings. But what they can say, because you can't prove it, is, "No, sorry, your price was too high." And so certainly may not be the real reason why they aren't going to do business with you. It's also really important to know who you're competing against. Who's your competition? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And how do you differ from them? That's really important. And always assume that your competitors are smart and capable, and never criticize them. I learned that the hard way as a young commercial printing salesperson many years ago, when I was competing for a pretty good size order from a print buyer, an advertising print buyer. And I knew he said I was competing against, he was getting another price from one of my competitors. And I said something critical of that company. I don't remember what it was, but it was something critical. And I didn't get that order. And I actually didn't get an order from this buyer for about 2 months. And I finally asked him, you know, geez, what's going on? And he said, you know, that other company that you criticized, they're a valuable supplier of mine. And when you criticize them, you were criticizing me too for using them. And I didn't like that. Couldn't blame him. And so I walked off with my tail between my legs. And I never made that mistake again. So always think about your competition as capable as you are. And you want to be able to try and learn the arguments, the messaging that your competitors use, you know, in a selling situation, so that you can talk, you know, be proactive and explain in advance to your customer why you think you've got a better solution than they might offer. So maybe you want to speak to some of their clients. Maybe some of your former clients are now using your competitor. Call them up, ask them why they make the switch. What did that company say to them that got them to convince them to buy from them? So whatever may work. Obviously, go on their website, see what their messaging is, how it differs from yours, and how you can counteract it in a selling situation. And also remember, you know, people may not be ready to buy from you today, but when your clients are ready, and you want them to think of you as the solution to their problems. Last point before Beverly picks up the rest of the workshop. We've said you're wearing a lot of hats, including that big sales hat. And what's really important is that you don't wing it in sales. You've got to set some time for selling during your business week. So maybe it's every Monday and Thursday from 9 to 11. Put it in your calendar. Don't think, oh, I'll just do this when I get around to it. But put it in your calendar. Don't override it, and so that you've got that block of time to follow up on leads, to get back to folks you met at that networking event. Check back up with old clients who you haven't heard from in a while. Check your social media and see who's responding. What are the inbound leads that have come in? Who's in process and follow? That's the time that you want to be doing your selling and create that time for you. You also want to be setting some goals, and the goals that we want to be setting are what's known as SMART goals, S-M-A-R-T. They're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, and time-bound. So, for example, a great SMART goal might be, I want to get 12 new clients next year. That's fits all those S-M-A-R-T categories, and it's a good goal. And at the end of the workshop, I'm going to come back in and we'll talk a little bit more about how to achieve a goal like that. Beverly, you want to pick this up?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dick. So I want to start by saying the mantra I use pretty much throughout my career, which is successful people do what others aren't willing to do. There's a lot of times you're not going to want to make that call. You're not going to want to prospect when you have a lot of business and you're busy. But successful people do what others aren't willing to do. So we're going to start by touching on something Dick had touched on earlier, which is define as precisely as you can your customer. The more precisely you can do that, the better you will be able to find them, how to reach them, what to say to them. You need to know their problems, not only the problems that you're going to solve, but the problems that they face in that industry throughout that company. That will help you create rapport. It will help you to seem like you know their industry. So the more you know about your customer, the better. Also, you want to find out where they get their information from. Do they get it from certain websites? Do they get it from certain periodicals? Do they get it from certain conferences? All of that is going to help you to reach them. And a lot of times when people, especially in the beginning and they're starting their company, they're like, I don't know who my customer is, and they're afraid of drawing too small of a segment. You can have multiple customer segments, but you might need to reach them differently. I had somebody who was a locksmith, and his bread and butter, his cash flow, came from the kids who locked themselves out of BU, Northeastern BC on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. But he's going to market them differently than he is to the property owners, the business managers, the facilitators who actually run like condo complexes. That's where he gets the multiple sales, and it takes much longer. And of course, it's a very different route to those people. The other thing is to look at unaddressed segments. Just because everyone wants to sell, quote, a lawyer or a doctor. Well, when I had my company, I sold the startups. I sold the engineers. Nobody wanted to sell the engineers because they asked too many questions. So I said, well, know the answers. And I worked with startups that were small, and everyone says, well, there's not enough money in startups. But that was extremely short-sighted because the startups grew. And by the time they became plum customers, what happened was they couldn't dislodge me because I had done such a great job. So think about the unaddressed segments and think about multiple segments and that you would address them differently. Next slide, please. You know, life is a little easier now than when I started because everybody is in your phone. What you can do is either create an Excel spreadsheet, however you would want to do this, but you want referrals and you want to make a list of people who you could potentially sell. So go through your phone, go through your Instagram followers, go through your Facebook friends, go through LinkedIn, make a list. And what you want to do is divide that list into who can buy now, who can buy later, and very importantly, who can provide me with referrals. Referrals, referrals, referrals. They can be from friends, they can be from family, they can be from clients, they can be from other vendors. They can be for people who don't buy. Let's say you're in a situation where the person doesn't have the budget or is forced to buy from the president's brother-in-law, but he adored what you said. You did such a great job. Ask him for referrals. He actually feels like he might owe you something. Also, LinkedIn is a great source because when you ask somebody for a referral, they might just go blank. They don't know who you're really looking for. So one, you should be able to describe who is your best prime customer so that they could give you a referral that fits into that category. Or go to LinkedIn before you meet them and see who they're connected to, who would be a good prospect for you, and suggest those people. Say, hey, I was looking at your LinkedIn and you seem to be connected to this person. That would be perfect. And if it's not that person they can refer you to, at least they now have an idea of who you'd like to meet. Networking at conferences and meetings can be very valuable. The problem is a lot of times people will go with somebody, and let's say you went with 3 people and there's a luncheon in between meetings and you sit at the same table. Well, you're going to meet 7 other people. But if you each took the risk, sat at a different table, you would meet 27 new people. Always try to talk to the person next to you, the person behind you, the person in front of you. You want to try and meet as many people as possible. If you're at a conference and people are going out after the conference, even if you don't drink and you'd love to go home and do your emails, it's best to go and network. Have a soda and stand around and talk and try to meet as many people as possible. You never know who your next best customer will be. I was in the hospital and came out of anesthesia and actually did business with the OR nurse. So anybody can be your best customer and your next customer. So always be ready with your elevator pitch just to gently tell somebody what you do. You never know if their brother-in-law is looking for your type of service, or their next door neighbor, or their best friend, you sell a food product, owns a small specialty gourmet store. You just don't know. So your job is to let as many people know what you do. And what's wonderful is if you have someone else fill your pipeline. I worked with a part-time CFO. She would go to 4 new companies a year and bring me into each of those 4 new companies. Then a year later, she would move on, but I would continue to do business with that company. So every year I knew I was going to get at least 4 new clients from her. So let's give an example of, go back one, Dick. Let's give an example of another situation. You are a caterer for weddings. A wedding planner is a great center of influence for you. Also strategic partners. So you and the caterer and the florist are selling to the same people. Maybe you guys can share leads. That's another way of having somebody else help fill your pipeline. I would try and think outside the box. It's always helpful to think outside the box. So I knew that all the new startups that I wanted to work with would be at the venture capitalists Christmas party. I would do anything to go to those parties. And when I was at that party, I would introduce myself. And remember, they're there for a shrimp and a cocktail. They're not there for me to sell them. So I would say, this is what I do. Do you have a card? Would you mind if I called you on Monday? And they were happy to give me a card, and I would call them on Monday. So you really want to take an opportunity not to always sell somebody, but to get their card and be able to call them at a future point in time. And remember, you do need a good CRM tool or database because you want to get back to these people. And I have to tell you this story. I met a woman at one of these parties, and she was so mean to me. She did not want to talk to me. She did not really want anything to do with me, but she did give me her card. And it took at least 15 minutes that Monday for me to call her. But remember the mantra, successful people do what others aren't willing to do. And I finally called her. Not only did I do business with her, she invited me to her 50-person wedding 2 years later. So you never know what's happening in the other person's world. It's mainly exposure, trying to get the number and be able to set up an appointment at some future time. Next slide, Dick. So there's a difference between what I call inbound marketing and outbound marketing. Outbound is when you're making the calls and you're finding the referrals. It was interesting. I said to somebody, do you ask for referrals? And his comment was, well, it's hard getting testimonials. Well, testimonials go on your website. That is not inbound. Okay. Referral is when you actually make the call. Testimonials are important, but it's very important for you to be proactive in creating a client base. But inbound is extremely important in this day and age. If you are doing inbound marketing, social media marketing, first of all, we have webinars that the entire webinar is on this subject. You must stay current with it. You must have a cadence where you are posting on a semi-regular basis and providing people with information or visuals that are important to them. Facebook is great for visual products, food products, jewelry, clothing. LinkedIn is great. People post videos if they're consultants. It is great for priming the pump, as I mentioned before, so that you can actually get referrals from that. Instagram is great for visuals. Getting noticed by an influencer. If you can have that happen, that can definitely grow your business exponentially. Cold calling and buying lists can be very helpful, but if you are doing that, you want to make sure that there is a follow-up phone number. I know I keep talking about it, but what the cadence is when you're doing something like that is oftentimes send an email, try with a phone call, send an email, try with another phone call. I had a client who after that point would actually send an invite, a calendar invite, and oftentimes was able to get an appointment that way. Blogging and videos help you become an expert in people's eyes. It is really important, again, as much exposure as you can get. Email campaigns, very important because you may not have enough referrals to keep you going. So, as I said, define your customer very carefully. If you do an email campaign and there are 100 good prospects, you actually meet with 10 and you sell 3. But if you didn't define your customer very carefully, yes, you might get 500 leads to send to, but embedded in that is still the only good 100. And you're only going to get 10 meetings and you're only going to sell the same 3. So isn't it better to define your customer more carefully so that you're not spending more on the 400 that you shouldn't have been calling and wasting all that time getting all those no's? So I think you can see that the 100, even though you might say, oh, well, it's only 100. Well, you're going to get 3 from that 100. And think outside the box. When I was calling people as startups, the Secretary of State had a list. And as I said, successful people do what others aren't willing to do. I would actually stand at a phone booth and call information 400 times to get the phone numbers and be able to call all of these people. Somebody in our a counselor actually said that his client started a dental practice and would send a huge flower basket with the brochures. And it was in an industrial area. And it was perfect because people don't want to spend a lot of time going far to a dentist. They could go for an hour. They could go in their lunch hour. So he was able to build his practice in that location by sending this flower basket that had a brochure, that had multiple brochures in it. Next slide. Pay per click. There are really 2 sides to every web page. One is those that get on there organically, which involves search engine optimization, SEO. Again, that is probably one of the more important things you can hire if a lot of your leads are going to come through the internet. Pay-per-click is where the banner ads, the ads show up. It's usually done through a blind bidding to get yours to the top of that page. The problem is every time they click on you, it's a charge. And if you're not getting a lot of conversion from that click, it's going to cost you a lot of money. But you want to make sure that you do have a great website and that you are in the top parts of the pages, have something unique to say so that people actually really see your website and are directed to you. And again, we have full webinars on this. Next slide, Dick. Direct mail. A lot of people think it's archaic, but in essence, it depends on your industry. It may not be. If somebody sent me a card saying that they washed windows, probably around February or March, I would hold that card because I could use a window washer for my house. And that would be a great way of knowing who is available and in my area, willing to come to my area. So direct mail does have its purpose. Trade shows. Trade shows can be very helpful. One, if you can speak at a trade show, that can be wonderful. Also, if you're going to be at a trade show, don't sit in the back of your booth. You want to be upfront and talking to people. You also want to make sure you have enough people to man your trade show. Even if they're not you, if they can try and get email addresses, try and talk to people, it's very important. Also, when people are in meetings, talk to the other vendors who are presenting. Remember, they're selling to the same people you are. That's why they're there. Maybe you can create that strategic alliance and share leads. I had a client who did very high-end musical instruments, custom made, and he affiliated himself with a very high-end amp dealer, and they were able to share leads. Speaking engagements, educational seminars, excellent place. Talk to alumni groups, talk to associations, be seen as an expert. It's very important that you get as much exposure, especially if you're a service industry. Other food products, festivals, open markets, there's many opportunities that are available to you. Again, think outside the box. Next slide. Dick touched on the elevator pitch. Mine was, I do insurance planning and benefits planning for the high-tech and biotech industry. I love working with the founders of startups. In 2 seconds, you knew exactly what I did. You knew who my prime target was. I worked with a woman who was going to a networking event, and she didn't have an elevator pitch. So we developed a beautiful elevator pitch. And then I said, okay, say it to me. And she goes, well, I can't do that. And I said, well, if you can't do it to me and we've worked on it, how are you going to do it tonight? So she finally agreed to say it to me, and it was rough. And she said it again, and it got better. And by the end of our meeting, I would dropped a pencil on the floor and I said, okay, pick it up and say it at the same time. That's how well you need to know your elevator pitch. Not only do you need to know your elevator pitch, but you need to know your probing questions. The questions you would ask somebody, oh, how is your current vendor? What problems have they solved for you? What type of problems have you had? What you want to do is find out those pain points that Dick was talking about, but you need to know your questions so well that you don't have to think about your questions. You want to spend your time listening to the answers so that you can develop solutions. And if somebody doesn't have any problems, remember, you know your industry so well, you could say, well, did this ever happen to you? Did that ever happen to you? Oh, it did. How did it get resolved? Could it happen again? Have you ever thought about this? All of these have to be almost innate. They have to come from deep inside you that you know so well that they roll off. So literally, you can spend all your time listening to them. They're going to tell you what you need to solve as the problem. And then you're going to articulate how you can help them. It's not about you. It's about them. And always ask for the order of the follow-up opportunity. I actually once put on my coat and was heading out the door, and the person said, "Don't we have to sign some paperwork?" So you don't want to be caught in that situation. But more than that, you don't want to be in a situation where you have to chase somebody for the follow-up appointment. Make the appointment. If you know it's going to take 2 weeks to come back with a proposal, say, let's make an appointment in 2 weeks. And I will call you at the beginning of that week to confirm that it's still a good time for you. Otherwise, you're chasing them for the appointment, and then you're chasing them to get to see them again. Let's say it's 2 weeks later. So this way, at least you have the appointment on the books. Then you only have to make sure that they keep the appointment, or you have to reschedule it. Next page. Now, telephone work does take time. And 1 or 2 no's does not mean you have a bad script. It does not mean you're saying the wrong things. It does not mean that you don't have a good list. If it's 100 or 200 no's, then maybe you need to think about things. But telephoning does work. That personal touch does work. You need to be positive, have a solid message. I had windows that went from ceiling to floor, and it would be this time of year where it gets dark around 4:30. And so you wouldn't see out the window, you'd reflect yourself back. And I was actually smiling as I was making calls, because people can hear that. And somebody came in and said, "How can you be smiling while making cold calls?" And to me, it was an opportunity to make money. If you look at it like, "Oh, I've got to make these 10 calls before I leave," you're not going to sound good. You might as well go home. Because even though you use a script, you cannot sound canned. You have to think about pace. You have to think about tone, inflection. You need to make every one of those calls sound like it's the only call you're making that day. That this is the most important person you're talking to all day long. I used to always get an appointment with my first call. Why? I was fresh. It was new. I sounded good. I built rapport. You want to really think about every call, not look at it like a list you're going through. So again, make it distinct, make it specific. And remember, the best time to call for them is not always the best time to call for you. Before there was voicemail and I was calling, it would be early in the morning before the assistant got in, or late on a Friday afternoon, because the only one working was obviously me and the president of the company who I wanted to reach. Again, successful people do what others aren't willing to do. Next slide, Dick. Remember that your goal is to get a meeting, not to sell your product. You need to listen to their problems and then try to uncover their problems and talk about how you can potentially solve their problems. Don't sell, ask questions, educate. Did you know that? And then list up things that potentially could happen that you could solve. And remember, you want to build empathy, rapport. The longer you keep them on the phone, the more likely you're going to get a meeting. And if they say no, always ask if there's a better time to call back. You don't know what's going on in their world. Maybe they can't meet you now because they just renewed with another vendor, or they're moving their offices within the next week, or they are waiting for venture capital money or some other type of infusion before they do anything. Always ask. It may be their busy season. You don't know what's going on in that person's life. They may be going through a divorce and want nothing else added to their plate at this time. So ask if there's a better time. When do they usually review this, etc. And be organized. Have a client management software. It's very important that you do get back to these people. I know a lot of times people won't get back to say, they didn't buy the first time. Again, always make the call. Next slide. It's very important that you create rapport. It's interesting. Sometimes people don't know if they've created rapport. If you do something like touch your face and they touch their face, you've created rapport. I would oftentimes put my hands on the desk. If they put their hands on the desk, you've created rapport. They actually mirror a lot of your body language if you've created that. And you need to, with your clients, know how to talk to them to create the feeling that is important for them to trust you and want to buy from you. An MIT insignia ring is called the brass rat. If I walked into a meeting and there was a brass rat on their finger, I knew I had another client, because I knew how to make them feel so that they trusted me for me to do business with them. And really, it's the art of listening. You want to ask, you don't want to tell. I always said, I don't sell. I never felt like I sold. They bought. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, as they say, use them. They should be talking 80% of the time and you 20% of the time. Because remember, if you don't cover any pain, if there's no problem, there's no sale. The other thing that I often would do during a meeting is say, though most people only meet with me, have you talked with anybody else? My goal is to uncover any competition so I can be ready for the next meeting. And it's not to criticize the competition, but to know what your value is above that competition. Be prepared. So I'm going to repeat that line. Though most people only meet with me, have you met with anybody else? So it's not going to invite them to look at competition, but it's going to let you know if there is competition. Next page. It's always important that you meet with the decision maker for multiple reasons. I joke and say, well, you don't want someone else doing your job. That may stay in your head, but the fact is you really don't want somebody else presenting to the decision maker. What happens is the decision maker may have different pain points than the person you're talking to. So you've got a product that's going to save the engineer a tremendous amount of time. But that's not what the pain point of the CFO who makes the decision is. His may be, what's the return on investment? So the fact is, you want to be able to present to the CFO. The other thing is, you know everything about your product or services, and you know how to present it. You can answer all questions about it. The minute you leave somebody's office, they forget 50% of what you said. And by the time a week later, they're meeting with the CFO to talk about it, they could have gotten another 25%. And if the CFO asks a question that the person doesn't know the answer to, what do? So you want to make sure that you can then ask to present to both of them together. Another important thing is, can they afford your services? I had a client recently say that to me. She worked hard on her proposal and they wanted to pay her $2,000 and it cost $5,000. But more than that, you want to know, maybe you set it up as a base policy with add-ons. Maybe you structure it so it's over a period of years so that they can afford it better. A question that I always ask is, what needs to occur before we can move forward? Now, that question brings in whether there's a committee they need to go before, if there's another decision maker that they need to talk to, if they need that VC funding, venture capital funding to come in, if they're moving offices, if they just renewed something, if it's something they're thinking of, but they have to implement a different software package before they look at what you're talking about. There can be many reasons. That's probably one of the most important questions you can ask. What needs to occur before we can move forward? And always have a pipeline of your prospect. The biggest mistake people make is that they're so busy that they aren't continuing to prospect. Never be afraid that you're going to have too many prospects. All you do is have to set the expectation. Gee, I'm so busy now that I could do this in 3 months. Always, always keep prospecting. And you want to make that sale. Dick?
One sec, Beverly.
Hmm?
Seeing. Let's see that I've come back on the screen. Teresa, am I back on?
Yeah, you're back on. It's just that you're sharing the slides, so you might
Okay.
not see it.
So let's wrap up with a couple important points. Goal setting. You need to be able to track your progress to your goals. And one of the folks who can help you do that are the two people who you've been listening to today, Beverly and myself, and or any other SCORE counselor. So think about that. But before we do that, let's define what is the goal. And so your goal could be maybe you want to earn $50,000 more next year, or it may be you want to increase your sales by $100,000, or you want to get 12 new clients next year. Those are all very legitimate goals. But in order to get there, after we've created that goal, you need what we call a recipe for success. What are the behaviors that you need to do to reach that goal? How many calls or meetings or proposals do you need to make to become successful and reach that goal? Behaviors could be going to a networking event. That's a behavior. Meeting 3 people at a networking event, 3 likely prospects, sending out X number of emails, receiving so many inbound inquiries, calling X number of people. Those are all legitimate behaviors. So let's talk about a specific goal right now and how we're going to achieve it. So let's say our goal is indeed to add 12 new clients next year. Well, that averages out to 1 new client a month. And just from your past history, or you make an assumption, either way, but we're going to say that for every 4 meetings that we have with 4 new prospects, one of those prospects is going to turn into a client. So therefore, you need to have 1 prospect meeting every week on average to get 1 new client every month. And you also know, or you can start with this number, that if you meet 25 people and 25 prospects and have 25 conversations, either at a networking event or over the phone, or even a solid email conversation, or at a trade show, for every 25 people that you meet, 1 of those is going to turn into a meeting. And you're going to uncover what their problems are, and they're going to want to meet with you you've asked the right questions, and they said, "Yep, I think we should meet." So those are the behaviors. That's indeed your regular goal, the regular behaviors that you need to do to reach that goal. You need to make those 25 connections every week, which will get you to 1 meeting a week, which will get you to 1 new client every month, which will get you to 12 new clients every year. So the 25 connections is your recipe for success. So as we've said, we're happy to take some questions now. If you'd like to meet with Beverly or myself, put a note in the chat. If you want to connect with a past SCORE counselor, we can do that also. If you want to make an appointment with a SCORE counselor, we can do that too. Just put a little note in the chat. We have your contact information, and either Beverly or I or Teresa will get back in touch with you. Teresa, any questions for?
Yeah, we're going to kind of narrow them down because we have gone a little bit over. So
Okay.
Selling B2B, how do you figure out who the correct person to talk to is?
Well, you got to start somewhere. So,
I think it's starting with the decision maker. You know who actually spends the money to buy that particular product or service. So you really want to try and talk to the decision maker as best you can. For me, it changed actually, because when it was a small company, it was the office manager. When it became a slightly larger company, it was the CFO. And when it became even a larger company, it was the HR department. So you really have to try at different levels. And if you can't get in to see the level that you want, it's sometimes helpful to try a level below and see if you can get referred up. I don't know your particular industry, but again, if I did, I could probably help you a bit more narrowed down to find the right person. But it's generally follow the money. The person who actually makes the final decision is the best person to meet with.
How do you find the demographics or the contact information for your target customer segment?
oh, there are a lot of database sources that you can create a database around those demographics. There's some tools that if you get in touch with me, I can direct you. But for example, the Boston Public Library has a business division called the Kirstein Division, and they can direct you to different databases that you can use to put in a geography, a certain type, the name of the type of business that you want to see, and it actually produces a full database of potential prospects.
Also, a lot of times you can Google the types of companies that you want and create your own type of database. I've had people do that. I've had people hire interns from schools to help them create a database, or you can go to a constant contact and they can oftentimes create that type of a mining for you. So it's
there,
really
there are a number of software tools that will be able to mine it and create a database based on the specifics that you tell them, including email addresses.
Okay. I think that's all we're going to have time for. I did just get a question unrelated to this webinar on trademark and LLC. If that person would reach out to me by email, and I can get you connected to a mentor. We don't know what your situation is, so outreach@scoreboston.org. outreach@scoreboston.org. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Dick and Beverly. And we hope to see our attendees at another webinar in the future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa.
Bye.
Happy Halloween.